Okay, so we're starting a new unit today, and this unit is going to be about proving that figures are congruent. So what we want to start out with is a definition of what congruent is and what we mean when we say figures are congruent. The first thing that we want to talk about a little bit is the ABCD theorem. It's the one that we already talked about in the last unit, that if we have an isometry, which is a translation, a reflection, a glide reflection, or a rotation, then all isometries preserve A, angle measure. So that means in both figures the angle measure would be the same. B, betweenness, which sort of means that if a point is between 2 points on a line in the pre-image, it will be between the same 2 points in the image. Collinearity and distance. So the definition of congruent that we're going to use is figures are congruent if and only if there is some isometry that can transform one into the other. So if you look at all of my lowercase letters there, all of those would be considered congruent, because I can change B into D using a reflection. I can change P to P using a reflection and a rotation. And I can do B to Q by doing a reflection and a rotation. So there's a couple, all of those would be considered isometries, and they would be considered congruent because one of them would map right on top of the other one. Okay, so we also have things like directly versus indirectly congruent. First, let's look at the directly congruent, which would be these two flags, and that would mean that the two flags have the exact same orientation. So in other words, looking at this flag, the, cross symbol, I don't know whether it is in the same place here as it is here. It's in the upper left-hand corner. Whereas if you look at this one over here, one of them is in the upper left and the other one is in the upper right. So these two would be considered indirectly congruent because the orientation is switched. When we're talking about congruent, this is the symbol that we're going to use. We don't have to always say the word congruent. We can use this symbol, which looks like an equal sign with that guy on top is called a tilde, but that is the symbol for congruent. We also have the transitive property of congruence. If A is congruent to B and B is congruent to C, then we can slice B out and say A is congruent to C. So if two things are congruent to each other and then one of them is congruent to a third, then they're all three congruent. So that's the transitive property of congruence. The last thing that I want you to do is I want you to look at these two pictures, and I want you to find the things that are not congruent. I believe that there are 12 differences, so there are 12 things in this picture that are not congruent, and I would like for you to try to find all 12. I will show you the answers to this tomorrow, so look at the two pictures and find the things that aren't congruent. After you finish the video, what you need to do is you need to answer the questions in the assignment section of Edu 2.